Hello and welcome back to Simple Money Podcast. I'm your host, Matthew Sewick, also known as the Friendly Financial Coach. Continuing our series on educational planning, today we're going to look at how to fund a post-secondary education. This is a crucial step in creating and executing an educational plan. Today's episode is really a summary that gives you a broad perspective of the many steps that are involved in funding an education. We'll be covering all of these topics in further detail in future episodes. Next week, we're going to be speaking with Sarah from Halton Poverty Roundtable about the barriers facing financially vulnerable households. It's going to be a great episode. In the last episode, we discussed how the first step of any education plan is to determine approximately how much money is required to fund a post-secondary education. If we use a map, this would be our destination. The next step is to really determine how we're going to arrive there. The path to getting to this destination can be achieved by using your own resources or through the funds of a third party, like government grants, scholarships, or a loan. Of these, your own resources are the most dependable. Some government grants and funding sources have a tendency to change over long periods of time, and expecting the funds to be there in 15, 20 years can be risky. As a recent example, the Saskatchewan government put their provincial education grant on hold due to budgetary issues. Individuals that plan to receive these funds will now have to find other ways to fill the gaps. One of the best and most popular ways to fund an education is through a Registered Education Savings Plan, or RESP for short. This is one of the most important forms of funding, and we will be dedicating several episodes to cover this topic in detail. As an introduction, the basic idea of an RESP is that it's a long-term investing plan that offers several incentives that can drastically help finance a post-secondary education. These incentives are extremely powerful and will help you achieve your education funding goals. One of the many incentives are government grants. There are a handful of these available. The most accessible one is called the Canada Education Savings Grant, or CESG for short. This grant matches 20% of your contributions up to $500 a year. This means that a portion of your contributions automatically earn 20% before any investment returns are made. And this is massive. There are other generous grants available to medium and low income households. These are the Canada Learning Bond, provincial grants, and additional CESG. We'll be exploring all of these in detail during future episodes. The other big benefit of RESPs is that they grow tax-free until the funds are withdrawn. This allows the investments to grow faster than if income taxes were charged every single year. We'll also be covering RESP withdrawals and taxation in a future episode. Other sources of funding a post-secondary education also comes from provincial grants. These vary heavily by province, but can really help pay for a portion of education costs. Often, these are tied to the income and situation of a household. A big example is in Ontario. The OSAP grant, in some cases, can exceed the average price of tuition. This grant is based on household income and is reduced as households earn more money. A quick tip for government grants is that the parents are often required to file their income taxes to be eligible for them. So make sure that you're on top of your income taxes. Other sources of income can be generated by the student as they get closer to going to school. Scholarships and work can help fill any funding gaps or allow them to pay for extra costs like living away from home. Scholarships are a very generous option that in many cases can cover a large portion of a student's educational costs. A common misconception is that scholarships are just for students that have good grades. This is actually not true. There are many scholarships that are available for volunteer work, art portfolios, essay writing, sports, and much more. It's actually reported that millions of dollars in scholarships are not claimed every year by students. So this is a big opportunity if students know where to look. Thankfully, there are a growing amount of online resources that allow students to sort through the large amount of scholarships that are available. Now, if there's a gap between educational costs and the existing funds that can be used to finance it, then we need to look at borrowing options. So the major sources of borrowing come from government lending and student lines of credit offered through financial institutions. These are borrowing products that will need to be paid back at some point in the future, typically when a student is out of school. Of course, having an education is an investment in yourself, and using borrowing options to fund this offers an opportunity to earn higher income from an education. With that being said, borrowing is a large responsibility, and we will be spending several future episodes covering these situations in detail. So that's it for now, but today's episode was really a broad summary of all the solutions that we'll be covering in future episodes. The big idea is that you'll need to know how much a future education will cost, and then figuring a way of funding that. So the main resources that you'll want to use first are your own funds, scholarships, and any government grants. And if there is still a gap that exists, then that's when you have to look at borrowing options to pay for education. As always, if you have any questions or episode recommendations, you can send me an email directly at info@ffcoach.ca, or you can find me on Twitter at @F_F coach. Take care and talk to you soon.